Welcome in to the show, Dr. Justin Anderson, right here on the program, Metabolic Coaching. And, of course, check us out, metabolic-coaching.net. And Cut the Killer Carbs on Facebook, of course, along the way. If you have any questions for the good doctor, feel free to give us a call at any time throughout the broadcast at 745-5800, 745-5800. Or you can text in your question as well, 806-745-5800. Well, let me say good morning once again to Dr. Justin Anderson. Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning, Wade. Thanks for having me in today.
Hey, glad to have
you here.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I was just telling you during the break that, well, before we came on, and said, I'm doing the intermittent fasting and cutting carbs. I'm following your lead.
Good.
Feeling pretty good. Lost about 10 pounds. I'm working on that. Again, it doesn't happen overnight. Like we've always said, you didn't get in that ditch, in one day, and you're not going to get out of that ditch in one day, right? I mean, when it comes to diet and doing all the things you need to do, it just doesn't happen that way. But with every journey,
it'd be nice if it did.
Oh, wouldn't it be great?
Yeah.
But with every journey, the first is the first step. Again, you got to take that first step, getting back on the road to good health. And so I am on that journey now and feeling a lot better. And just knowing that, hey, look, I want to get back to good health and lose, and I really need to lose about 40 pounds. I really do. But they're going to have people and times that will be going along, doing the program, not looking at it from a standpoint of a diet, but just how we use our food and how our body utilizes it. But there will become times when you run into a plateau, right?
That's right. Yeah. And so there's sometimes when you get stuck. And so, really what I want to talk about this show is for people who are doing an LCHF diet. They're doing a low carb, high fat diet. They think they're doing everything the same as they've been doing it. They've been losing weight. So today we'll talk about weight loss. They've been losing weight along the way, but then they get stuck. And I consider it to be a plateau. If somebody is doing low carb, high fat diet and they haven't lost weight for 3 weeks, that's a plateau. The weight has been kind of going down a couple of pounds or a pound a week. And then for 3 weeks, no change. And the reason I use the 3-week mark is that there's this thing called the Whoosh Phenomenon, and nobody really can explain it, but it'll be like you're on the low carb, high fat diet, you're losing weight, but for a couple of weeks it kind of stops, and then the third week you'll lose 2 pounds, and then for a couple of weeks nothing happens, and the third week you lose 2 pounds, and it's like whoosh, the weight comes off, and so
oh, wow.
if you make it to 3 weeks and nothing has happened at 3 weeks, then at that point I consider you to have reached a plateau and for you to be stuck. And so we'll talk about the things that could be holding you back and things that you should consider as you go along. And the number one first thing, if somebody's doing a low carb, high fat diet and they get stuck, is to count carbs. And I mean count carbs religiously, because the whole basis of the low carb diet is that you're going to eat 20 or less carbs a day. But as you get into it for a while, you can kind of get sloppy, and you don't really count the carbs because you kind of ballpark, well, how many carbs are in this or that. But 90%, we do these follow-ups every week for metabolic coaching. And in these follow-ups, 90% of people, they'll be losing weight. And there's kind of the 10% that are stuck or at this plateau. And the first thing I tell people is count carbs, because a lot of times people will think, I'm only eating 20 net carbohydrates a day. But really, to stop and count, and you should do this for 3 days, you should write down a journal of everything that you eat with your estimated carb count, everything that goes in your mouth, really, because it includes, there are carbs in all sorts of things. There are going to be carbs in your chewing gum, right? In the artificial sweeteners like the Sweet and Low packets, if you use a Sweet and Low packet or an Equal packet, you should count that as 1 net carb. Why? Because it says 0 calorie sweetener, right? But if you flip those packets over and you read on the back, next time you're in a restaurant, flip over the packet of Sweet and Low, and you'll see the number one ingredient in Sweet and Low is going to be glucose. or dextrose. They call it dextrose. And dextrose, it's the same thing as blood sugar. I mean, it's like the second or third ingredient is going to be the artificial sweetener. And some of these artificial sweeteners contain maltodextrin. So I would count any packet of sweetener that you use as one net carb.
Wow, and that's something that you don't even think about. I mean, for example, I was, and I'm on this boat where I'm really watching the carbs, and I'm at that level where I'm looking at my food, going, well, is there any carbs in this? Is there some bread here? Is there some grains in this? Is there any kind of sugar hidden? And a lot of this stuff, doctor, is hidden. I mean, you really got to be up on it to really kind of, because you don't think. For example, I was at a salad bar. And I'm eating my healthy green, and I'm a spinach. I love spinach, raw spinach. Right. Eat it all day long. You can eat as much as one of that stuff, right? And I like it with red onions and broccoli and cauliflower. And so I'm loading up because I know I can eat all that as much as I want to. But then I get down to the back and I think, oh, well, some chicken. But it's like chicken wings. Right. And I'm thinking, well, I'll put that in there. Few of those, for my protein side of things. Get some chicken. That's all good. But then my wife, the health coach, she goes, well, now that chicken wing right there, it probably is basted in some kind of, is it a sweet? I said, yeah, it's really, well, she goes, there's probably a little sugar on that.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, yeah, but, I mean, is that really going to torpedo the deal?
Well, the deal is if you're stuck, then you got to look at it.
Right.
And so, and if you're, as long as you're making progress, you don't have to get that in depth into it. But if you're stuck, then yes, you count the things like a stick of chewing gum. It'll say on there, it might say on there 0 carbohydrates. But the thing is, as long as the number is less, if the number is 0.75, then they can just write 0 on the package. And it's the same thing with your sweetener packet. The sweetener packet, if it's 0.75 or it's less than 1, then they can write 0 carbohydrates. Another thing that people aren't aware of is they'll take supplements, and the supplements can have carbohydrates in them. Gummy vitamins, gummy calcium chews, I mean, those have carbohydrates in them, and so you should count those. And there was a time when I'd been talking to Dr. Ben, and I was taking beetroot powder. And I was taking beetroot, and the beetroot powder, I mean, it had a whole bunch of carbohydrates in it because it comes from sugar beets, right? And so you can get it from supplements and things like that you're not aware of.
Yeah, for example, and I'll throw another example out there. I really like bone broth. I think bone broth protein is excellent for you. I mean, I like to lift weights and work out, and bone broth protein is probably a lot better for you than the whey protein that's so prevalent in society today. But bone broth is really good. But this particular brand of bone broth protein that I have, I got to reading the back label. Sure enough, it wasn't a big amount of carbs, but there was some carbs in it because the manufacturer of it, puts a little, sweet or stevia in there or something, or whatever it is. But I just noticed, I said, I think for one scoop it had 1 carb in it, or something like that.
Well, a place where people can really get messed up is on these Atkins bars or some of these low-carb bars. They'll have a big star on the front of the package that says 4 grams net carbs. And the 4 grams net carbs, they get to that number by they take the total carbohydrate in the bar and they subtract out the fiber. And if you take the total carbs and subtract out the fiber, it'll be like 16 net carbs. And then they subtract out 100% of the sugar alcohols. And you really can't do that. So they'll take 16 and they'll take out 12 grams of sugar alcohols and get down to 4. You can't do that. Different sugar alcohols have a different glycemic index and a different effect on your blood sugar and insulin levels. And so probably the safest thing to do is to take the sugar alcohols and subtract only half of them. So a lot of those low-carb bars that say 4 grams net carbs on the front, instead of subtracting out 16 grams of, instead of subtracting out 12 grams of sugar alcohols, you can only subtract out 6. And so really they have like 10 grams of net carbs, and that's another place that people will get stuck.
Well, how often is it, doctor, that you're talking about food labeling, but how much is that? Can we rely on as being that accurate on a myriad of products?
Yeah, and so it's better to eat your foods that don't come with a label on them. And there have been a lot of health foods. Um, there were some nutrition bars that were supposed to be super high in protein, super low in carbohydrates, but then on independent testing, they contained a ton of sugar, a ton of carbohydrates. They were taken off the market. I used to recommend this type of whey protein drink because it tasted so good. I mean, it tasted like a malt. It was delicious and only had 2 grams of carbohydrates in it. And then come to find out, the company said, oh, well, we flipped the numbers for protein and carbohydrates. So really it was a sugar drink with just a little bit of protein in it. And
they flipped it. What do you mean by accident or something? That's what they claimed? In other words, if you're taking a protein drink that says, okay, this has got 22 grams of whey isolate protein.
They'd say 22 grams of protein and 2 grams of carbs. And they only had 4 ingredients listed on there. And they were like stevia, whey protein, cocoa powder, and something else. But then they came out with a new label and said, well, sorry. Well, really it was like 22 grams of carbs, 2 grams of protein, and the reason it tasted good like a malt was it contained maltose, and that's malt sugar. So the ingredients had been mislabeled, the protein and the carbohydrate content had been mislabeled, and so for that reason I'm not a big fan of a lot of those kind of processed prepackaged type foods. If you want let's say if you want whey protein, the best thing to do is just buy plain whey protein, which you can just buy at natural grocers. Plain whey protein, you can flavor it yourself, that way you know what goes in it. If you want to put cocoa powder and put stevia in it, you can know what's actually in there.
Yeah, well, that's you make your own concoctions, but you like that better than some of the prepackaged stuff. But again, to quote unquote eat clean is to do just that.
Yeah.
To eat what Mother Nature provided, and not something that had been, randomly made in a food processor someplace.
So the first tip is, number one, if you're stuck on a plateau, count your carbs. And the second tip is to look out for some of the medications that you're taking. And I have a lot of clients who will come in, they take the metabolic coaching program, and they may be taking 4 or 5 different medications, all of which cause weight gain, insulin resistance, and worsen diabetes. One of the biggest ones is hydrochlorothiazide. Hydrochlorothiazide is a blood pressure medication. And so people will be taking that medication in combination. Sometimes it's mixed with another pill, and so it'll be like metoprolol HCT, and the HCT is hydrochlorothiazide. And hydrochlorothiazide is well known to cause weight gain, worsening of insulin resistance, worsening of diabetes. And so if you're taking a medication like that, then you talk to your doctor. As your blood pressure comes down, your blood pressure improves, you can see if you can decrease or take off the hydrochlorothiazide. And the same thing goes for beta blockers. Beta blockers are like atenolol, metoprolol, propranolol. That's another medication for blood pressure that as your blood pressure gets better on the diet, you can take that off and it'll help speed your weight gain. The antidepressants, the SSRIs, those are things like Prozac, Paxil, and all of their generic fluoxetine, their generic names. Those are known to cause weight gain. And
I would have never guessed that. That's wild.
I don't ever tell anybody to get off or stop their antidepressants. But I will tell you that as you're doing the diet, as you get to feeling better over the course of months and months, then you can talk to your doctor and see about if you can decrease the dose. Because you start to on this type of low carbohydrate, high fat diet, you start to normalize your neurotransmitters, normalize your hormones, you have more energy, you feel better, and then you can, after all that happens over the course of months, you can slowly decrease the dose on those medications.
Well, it also seems like your natural serotonin levels probably should come up as well. Everything should start acting accordingly the way God intended, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And then, because, again, I understand that some people, when you're in that ditch, you're going to have a drug initially. All right, you're in the ditch. You've over 20, 30 years course of your life. You need a drug now because you're just really in that bad of shape. But as you work back to a healthy lifestyle, then yes, I totally see that where, you know, your body will respond accordingly once you get to feeling better. Serotonin levels improve, your mood improves, outlook improves. And you may say, well, that's because I'm taking Paxil. Maybe not.
You know,
It might be, but by the fact that you're finally starting to treat your body right.
the brain responds to sugars exactly the same way it responds to cocaine. And they can take a functional MRI image of someone who's eating sugar and someone who's taking cocaine, and it lights up the brain identically. And that's why things like sugar are addictive. And as you get off those, what happens is, in a cocaine addict, they take cocaine and it makes them feel good, and they release a bunch of these neurotransmitters, and then they end up burning out their ability to release normal amounts of neurotransmitters unless they take the drug. And so that same sort of thing happens with people consuming a lot of sugar, and wheat does a very similar thing. So a lot of sugar, a lot of wheat, those are the two most addictive foods. And so you kind of burn out your brain's ability to make normal amounts of neurotransmitters until you get off of them. And then you get off of them, and over the course of months, your brain can start to make normal amounts of neurotransmitters like it used to without having, in this case, the food, the sugar, to stimulate it to release it.
I wonder, and I'm just going to take liberty here since I have you on the show and talk about my own issue. But I am solely addicted to this right here, right? I'm holding that up, or in radio people, well, you can see on video maybe. But that is a really bad product. That is you talk about cocaine, nicotine, extremely addictive, right? Now, I've been addicted to Skull Original Fine Cut for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
Canada user, 35 years. The only issue I have with this is I was just thinking about that when you were talking, and I thought, it's wintergreen. I wonder if there's actually sugar in this. I don't know. There's no product label. It's tobacco. But it's wintergreen.
There's a trick that Dr. Bernstein teaches in his book. It's called Dr. Bernstein's Diabetes Solution. If you want to read the Bible of diabetes and if you want to know more about reversing your diabetes and controlling your diabetes than your doctor does, read Dr. Bernstein's Diabetes Solution. But in that book, he says you can take a urine test strip for glucose, and don't urinate on it, but you could put some of that in your mouth, and then you could spit it into a cup, and you could mix your urine test strip for glucose down there and see if it turns, I think it's red is the color, but see if it turns the color indicating that there's glucose. You can do that with your sweet and low packet, your equal packet.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd like to do that. Do you have some of those?
The packets or the strips?
The strips.
I don't have the strips, but you can buy them at any pharmacy. No prescription needed.
Oh, I can.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I want to do that.
And so if there's like a food, and they say, oh, well, there's no flour in this food, well, then you can. It sounds gross, but you chew it up a little bit because you have to mix it with your saliva. Your saliva breaks down the flour into glucose, into pure sugar, and then you can put the strip in there and test it and see if it has sugar in it or not.
Really? So I would just take my chaw out after a minute or two in my mouth, and then put the strip and see if that wintergreen's actually a sugar base. I'm sure it is, because it's not necessarily wintergreen's not sweet, but I'm sure there's a little bit in there. There has to be.
It may or may not, because there are certain spices that impart a sweetness without actually being sweet.
Without being sugar based.
Without being sugar, and that's one of the kind of tricks that you can use.
I bet I could Google it though.
Is you can use vanilla, or you can use like vanilla extract or almond extract. You can use those in things that you cook to impart a sweetness without actually having to add sugar. It gives a sensation of sweetness without actually being sweet.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other tips for breaking through these weight loss plateaus is to add omega-3 fats, uh, like a fish oil supplement or a krill oil supplement. Um, and that's because there's a theory that people uh, they're hungry, and their hunger is driven because they're looking for something in the diet, something that's missing. And what's missing in a lot of Americans' diets is enough omega-3 fats. The omega-3 fats are missing mainly because our cows eat grain, and when cows in a feedlot eat grain, they make a lot of omega-6. But if cows are in the wild, cows eat grass, and when they eat grass, they make a lot of omega-3s. And so omega-3s being absent in the diet can be something that kind of drives hunger because you're looking and looking for something that you're missing.
Interesting.
Another thing that can help people when they get on a weight loss plateau is to look at your diet, because you may be starving yourself. And I know you guys talked about this with Dr. Fung, that if you go on a calorie restricted diet and your calories are restricted every day, then your metabolism does indeed slow down. And what some people do is they hear, look, I'm supposed to cut out the carbohydrates and do a low carbohydrate diet. And then in addition to that, for 30 years, they've been told to cut out the fat. And so if they cut out the carbohydrates and they cut out the fat, they're starving. They're not getting a good source of calories. So you may need to actually make sure that you add in enough fat. Like you were saying, when you're going to the salad bar, adding olive oil to your salad, that's a good source of calories and fat.
What about ranch dressing? I like that.
Yeah, I mean, ranch dressing's it's not that bad, but it's not that good. The thing with ranch dressing, number one, is most ranch dressing, it has like 2 net carbs per 2 tablespoon servings. And so count the carbs in your ranch dressing, number one.
Okay.
Number two, most ranch dressing has in it MSG. And MSG is an appetite stimulant. And if you're trying to lose weight, taking an appetite stimulant is not really going to help you. Right? So we buy ranch dressing, and we always turn the bottle over, look on the back, and we look for ranch dressing that's no MSG and that maybe has 2 net carbs per 2 tablespoon serving. And I think that's fine.
I got you.
Yeah.
Again, okay. But if you're at a salad bar someplace, how do you know? You don't really know. Most of the time, it's going to have MSG in there.
Most of the time, it's going to have MSG. You don't know for sure. So.
Yeah, you don't. In fact, some restaurants, again, over the weekend we were at some Japanese place, and we asked, well, is there MSG in this? Oh, I don't know, maybe, probably, but then some say no and some say yes, but you never know. But it's always good to ask.
Yeah, you can ask, and a lot of places will have their nutrition information, and you can use that to get the carbs. Another thing, I'm not a big fan of exercise, but I've had several clients who, along the way, it's not a lot of clients, but they're just a handful that they can't lose weight unless they do some sort of exercise. And I recommend walk. You don't even have to, try and lift weights and bulk up, but a 30-minute walk first thing in the morning is adequate exercise for most people. And it's more exercise than most people get, and a 30-minute walk can help you break through that plateau also.
Well, I do that. I mean, I'm definitely on board. I have to exercise. There's just something about it. I don't know. Maybe it's me being in the Army 25 years, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I just don't feel, in my personal view, is I just don't feel right if I'm eating clean and eating healthy and low carbs, and then not exercising just doesn't compute with me. I would think you'd want to do that.
Yeah, and there are a lot of good benefits to exercise. Exercise makes you feel better. It builds your bones. It builds your muscles. It causes you to release endorphins, which make you feel good and improve your mood. Most people don't have to exercise to lose weight, and probably exercise makes up 5% of the equation, the weight loss equation. So if it makes you feel good, do it. One thing about if you exercise too much, exercise is actually a stress. and stress causes you to release excess cortisol, and cortisol is one of your fat storage hormones. And so exercise is a good thing for a lot of reasons. Excessive exercise can be as bad for you as it can be a cause of stress and even weight gain, surprisingly, if you do too much.
That's true. I've also heard that really, depending on what type of exercise you're doing, if say you're, I think obviously everything I've read says, do a combination of maybe having a strength training day and then a cardio day, maybe, four times a week. But the key is don't do it too much. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
don't say, okay, well, I'm just going to work out 2 solid hours right now. That's not productive.
Yeah.
Because then you get into a situation where, like you said, the cortisol and stuff gets really jacked to the moon. And so everything that I've read on this, and I've read a lot about the exercise piece, saying generally for most people, you need to keep it within that 30 to 45-minute range and no more. If you go over 45 minutes, then it can be counterproductive for most individuals. And we're not,
Right.
we're not talking
Uh,
about high-end, NFL superstars here. That's a different. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the average Joe. And once you cross into that over that 45-minute barrier, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's cardiovascular or strength training, you can get into a situation where it can be counterproductive. So utilizing that benchmark, 30 to 35, 45 minutes a day, 5 times a week kind of deal, that's really about where you need to be. That's everything I've read. I don't know. Do you agree with that? If you go over too much, I mean the 45-minute being kind of the barometer, the bench on the upper end, 30 minutes on the low end. But then again, there's a lot of studies out there saying, look, you can do this HIIT stuff for 12 minutes.
yeah.
And really get your heart rate up for a minute.
Well, I'll tell you, exercise is not really my forte because I spend 95% of my time concentrating on the diet because the diet's what's going to make 95% of the difference.
Yeah.
Right? And so I would just say some mild exercise helps a certain percentage of people who reach a plateau. And kind of all of these strategies I've developed from doing hundreds of clients along the way. I mean,
Right.
and none of them help 100% of the clients, and so I would tell you each of these strategies are going to be something. So you try it, you do it for a month, you see if you break through, you see what helps you. You do it for, I mean, you don't have to do it for a month, but you do it for at least 2 weeks, and that'll see if it'll help you break through.
Well, what about that, doctor? I mean, do you have clients who say, like me, who say, well, I really want to get, I'm on board, I want to do it right, but I want to blowtorch that fat off. And the one way to do it is to incorporate exercise into it or a lot of intermittent fasting, especially if you've hit a plateau. Do you see some of your patients who blowtorch it as compared to those who just do the normal diet, or is it about the same speed across the board as far as weight loss is concerned? Does that question make sense to you?
Yeah. Each people have these kind of individual rates at which they lose weight. And I would say for a male, and the younger you are, the more weight you'll lose. When you do a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, you'll lose 2 to 4 pounds a week. And for a female, it's 1 to 2 pounds a week. And if you're a postmenopausal female, you'll be kind of 1 pound a week. And so it has a lot more to do with their age, than it does necessarily with their activity level.
Really? And you haven't seen, in other words, okay, so that being said, and you've seen hundreds of patients this way, you haven't seen a marked difference that a patient who's doing the low carb, high fat diet, protein, but then incorporated exercise on top of that doesn't really speed the process up no matter what age? You don't really see that? I mean, it sounds to me like it's counterintuitive that, okay, well, my diet's cleaned up, it's right, and I'm throwing exercise on top of it.
Exercise is a builder. When you exercise, you build muscle. You build bone. It is a building process. Uh, ex, it's, yesterday I listened to your interview with Dr. Fung, and he said when you exercise, you don't exercise your liver, you don't exercise your fat. It's not your fat that's exercising, it's your muscles.
Right.
And so exercise is a building process, and exercise is about gaining bulk, gaining muscle, gaining weight. It can change the way your body looks, where you have, bigger muscles, stronger bones, but it doesn't necessarily cause you to lose fat. They did this great study where they took a group of couch potatoes, and they trained them to run a marathon. And so and they measured how much weight did they lose going from couch potato to marathoner. And the men on average lost 5 pounds. So training from no exercise at all to being able to run a marathon, men lost 5 pounds. And you know how much weight the women lost? None. So I mean, they gained muscle. They probably were in better shape. They probably changed the way their body looked. But as far from a weight loss perspective, it didn't help with weight loss. So
Wow. Well, we all know, and we've talked about that a lot, that you can't outwork out a poor diet. If your diet's poor, and I'm proof of that. I've been doing this for 4 years, and I work out diligently 5 times a week. But I noticed that old scale never really moves too much.
And you get bigger every year. You work out 5 times a week, and you get a little bigger every year. So, I'll tell you something that certain people have certain individual food sensitivities, and those can be the things that hold them back. And one of the biggest ones is dairy. So if you're doing a low carb diet, you've reached a plateau, or you can't lose weight, you should try a week or two of 100% dairy free, cutting out all the dairy.
Cheese, everything.
Cheese, everything, because it's
even eggs.
It's well, no, not eggs.
Okay,
not
eggs. Okay.
They're sold. The eggs are sold over in the dairy.
I keep thinking eggs is dairy.
They're sold in the dairy section, but they do not come from the cow.
That's right. Okay.
And that's because milk protein itself, the protein in the milk can be inflammatory for some people, number one. And number two, milk protein, if you think about it, I mean, babies are supposed to drink milk. And the reason they're supposed to drink milk is they're supposed to gain weight.
Right.
And the milk protein stimulates a high insulin response, and it can cause people to gain weight. And I've had just recently a client who we tried this and this and this. We tried a bunch of different strategies, and eventually we got to, let's just cut out the dairy for a couple of weeks and see what happens. And by cutting out the dairy, she went from being stuck to losing 1 or 2 pounds a week, week after week after week. And so it's the dairy.
Wow.
Yeah. Dairy can do that. Another thing that can cause, also the dairy, it's inflammatory to the digestive system, and so it can cause bloating, cause people, not for everybody, but for some people, cause the digestive system to hold on to fluid and cause weight gain that way. And some people, farm-raised fish will cause them to blow up like a balloon with just fluid retention, swelling, inflammation, and joint pain. So if you're going to eat fish, usually buying wild caught should be what you can get, Alaskan wild caught, that sort of thing, and avoid farm raised. And the problem with farm raised fish basically is that the fish are sick because they live in these farms where they're infested with what they call them sea lice. They have lice on them, and they're fed corn, which is GMO corn sprayed with Roundup. And in addition to that, they're held in rivers where they have a lot of runoff of industrial PCBs,
a lot of high mercury levels,
and all that stuff is in the farm raised fish, and the wild caught tends to be lower in those things.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, but that can inhibit your weight loss or cause a plateau. If you think, oh, I'm doing something healthy here, I'm eating fish, but it could have a reaction in the body that for some reason stops your progress.
Yeah, I mean, I had a client one time, and she said she started the diet and she was doing fine, and then she said, I'm swelling up. I can't wear my wedding rings. My ankles are swelling, and we had to go through and do a 3-day food diary. And I'll do that with clients. If they're having an issue, I'll have them send me a 3-day food diary so we can kind of figure out what's going on. And we did a food diary, and she kind of tracked things, and it turned out that what she had added to her diet was she was eating a lot of fish. And when she cut the fish out, then all the swelling and everything went away. And so she had to stick with, Alaskan wild caught salmon, that sort of thing, instead of the farm raised.
And just that little simple thing.
Mm-hmm. Just
That
that
one
simple
thing. And that's so weird to me, how that just one little thing like that could be all the difference.
Another thing that can cause people to reach a plateau is thyroid medication. If they use generic thyroid medication, the FDA allows a 20% tolerance in the active ingredients of generic drugs. And so they may, they go to their pharmacy, Walgreens, and they get their generic thyroid medication. They take it this month, they're losing weight, they're doing great. And then next month, they're gaining weight. And it may be that the thyroid medication, because it's generic and has that tolerance allowed in it, is really about 20% less active this month than it was last month. And then it can change next month and change next month. And the reason is, the pharmacy may buy it from a plant in the U.S. this month, and the thyroid medication that was made in India or Pakistan next month, and Mexico the next month. And you don't ever know, because your bottle says the same thing. It just says generic levothyroxine. So in general, brand name thyroid medication is going to always come from the same plant. And if it comes from the same plant, that should be the same strength. Also, for people who have thyroid, if they reach a plateau, if they have thyroid disease, they should check their temperature every morning, 3 days before they get out of bed, before they move around. Take your temperature under your armpit. And your temperature under your armpit first thing in the morning should be about 97.6, which is 1 degree lower than in your mouth. And that, I've had clients who they've done the program for 6 weeks, and they're eating low carb. They've broken their sugar addiction. They should be doing great. They should be losing weight, but they're not losing any weight. And I'll say, check your temperature for 3 days, and their temperature will be 96.0 or 94.9. And so if your temperature is that low, as low as 94.9, that means your thyroid function is low, which means your thyroid medication is not adequate to get your temperature up to normal. And so I had a nice lady, and she was 6 weeks, no progress. Checked her temperature is 94.9. Then she worked with her doctor to increase her thyroid medication slowly, and as she increased it and got her temperature up to about 96.0, then she started losing the weight normally. Started losing a pound or two a week. And so you can't lose weight if your thyroid function is way too low, and checking your temperature is a good indication of how to do that.
Text coming in wants to know about raw versus pasteurized milk. That's a little bit earlier what we're talking about milk, and you're saying that sometimes dairy can cause a stumbling block in the weight loss thing, but raw versus pasteurized, do you have any comment on that?
I don't have a big comment on it. I know that there are some benefits to raw milk. However, I have never had a client who, they switched over to raw and that was the solution. There's something that in the process of pasteurizing the milk, they heat it and cool it, and then after that, then they homogenize it. They homogenize the fat, make it into droplets. And there's some thoughts that doing all that can be more inflammatory. So I would say, if you're one of the people who's doing a low carb diet and you're stuck and you think it's the dairy, the first thing I would do is cut out the dairy for a couple of weeks and see if that causes you to start losing weight. And if you start losing weight, great, it's the dairy. You got it identified. When you add back, you could add back raw milk. And when you add back raw milk, you could see, does that cause you to put on pounds or not? And then you could add back regular milk, that sort of thing. And so I would add back the raw first. And so that's what happens is you cut out the dairy. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to take out the dairy for the rest of your life. But you cut out the dairy, and then you added things back kind of one at a time. Dairy, you can add back a certain cheese or add back dairy and see if that causes you to gain weight. And if it causes you to gain weight, it's still inflammatory for you.
I was going to say, I was drinking raw milk there for a while because I just love it. I think raw milk's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, it tastes so good. I mean, it's like a nectar of the gods. I mean, to me, I just love it. But I noticed something when I was drinking, and I would drink about, 6 to 8 ounces a day, let's say. And I noticed that when I was doing that, like I'd have a glass a day, maybe after work, and whatever. But I started gaining weight quick. Raw milk, man, really. I mean, it'll put it on you fast.
There's two things about milk, and one is that the protein in milk causes an insulin spike, which causes you to gain weight. Number two, milk has about 12 net carbohydrates in an 8-ounce cup. And so if you're trying to stay below 20 net carbs a day, then milk is kind of off the menu. You'd do much better to use heavy cream than you would to use milk.
And I love the cream on the raw milk, though. It was just like, and I know why, because there are those milk sugars, right? I mean, there is I say milk sugar.
I mean, milk tastes sweet.
I mean, it just, to me, was just like the cream was fantastic. But I tell you what, you eat a lot of that, man. I mean, I know it's healthy and all, and it is. Raw is great, but it'll flat put it on you. If you're trying to lose weight, I say, don't do it. I didn't. I totally gave it up.
So, I mean, really on a low carbohydrate diet, the best types of dairy to have is going to be, first of all, butter, because butter has the least milk protein and the least carbohydrates in it. And then next you could do something like heavy whipping cream, and heavy whipping cream has like 6 net carbohydrates per cup. And then after that would come, or kind of in between the butter and the heavy whipping cream, there will be cheeses, and the cheeses are going to be high in protein. They're going to be lower in carbohydrates.
What cheese is the best, though? Do you think? I mean, there's so many different kinds. I mean, it's hard, mild cheddar, Swiss, mozzarella. I mean, what? I know you probably just read.
It's a preference thing.
But are they all about the same as far as the carb deal, or no?
Just flip the package over and look on the back.
No,
flip
man.
the package and look on the back.
I know. Well, and I like eating the organic. Well, here's my favorite thing: organic pepper jack cheese. I love organic pepper jack cheese. It is low in carb.
I mean, yeah, a lot of them are kind of 1 gram of carbohydrates per serving.
Yeah, and I can eat them. I mean, I just love cheese. I'm a cheese eater, and I did like raw milk, but I think raw milk's way worse as far as losing weight. Now, not healthy wise, yeah. But if you're really trying to lose weight and you're chugging raw milk, man, it's gonna really derail that deal. I've proven that. Yeah. So, good question though.
One other thing is that if you reach a weight loss plateau, it could be the cheat days, because a lot of clients who come to my program, they've done something like Weight Watchers or some sort of program before where they have a once a week meeting, and a bad habit is on their meeting day, they'll weigh in, and if they lost a pound or two, then they'll go out and they'll have a cheat meal, and they'll just kind of eat whatever they want. Well, once you have switched your body over to running on fat and burning fat instead of burning sugar, if you have a cheat day where you eat a bunch of carbs, then that can throw you out of fat burning for about 4 days. And so if you do 1 cheat day a week, well, there's only 7 days in the week, then you end up 4 out of 5 days, you're not burning fat. You're burning sugar instead. And so for some people, it's the cheat days that are the thing that are really holding them back. And so
I think that's my problem. I really do, yeah.
Yeah.
The cheat, I didn't realize it would be 4 days, though. My goodness, really? That's what it is? I mean, because look, I'm no carbs for like 0 for like 3 or 4 days a week. And then on the weekend, I may have a little hops and barley. Got a couple of carbs in there, I think. But I'll have this pulled pork barbecue. Oh, but it comes wrapped in a tortilla. Or I may have the occasional the hamburger. And I know we've talked about this a lot, and I have done it some. But sometimes I find myself, I don't care. I'll eat the bun. Mm-hmm. But the key is, though, I've been doing this now I'm in my 4th week. I've lost 10 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good, but I would probably do a lot better if I really did it right, as opposed to, and so my question is, if you you say a cheap meal, so you have a hamburger with the bun, you're telling me that for 4 days that's going to derail everything else you've done? Is that, I guess, for some people true, right?
Yeah, for some, the thing is, for you to switch over and to switch over to really burning fat,
Right.
exclusively fat instead of sugar. I mean, that process is called becoming keto adapted, and becoming keto adapted, I mean, it can take you 4 to 14 days to get there initially. And once you're keto adapted, which means you're burning your own body fat off instead of burning sugar, then when you switch over to burning sugar, it can take you up to 4 days to get back to burning fat again. It won't take you a full 14 days. The good news is it doesn't throw you out for 14 days, but it can take you up to 4. And so
So it's
can
kind of
mess
like the
people
old
up.
saying, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Kinda. If you have a quote unquote.
Just keep stepping forward.
Yeah, but that could happen, right? So
Right.
I mean,
And so the deal is, if it's Thanksgiving and you want to celebrate and you want to eat whatever, pecan pie or whatever, or if it's your birthday or if it's Christmas, if there's some big holiday and you want to eat whatever you want, do it. Just know that it's going to knock you out for about 4 days, and so you're not going to be losing weight. But it doesn't work to do it every week. If you're doing it every week after week after week, then you're getting less than 50% of the benefit from your diet. And so
that's the key. I gotcha.
that's the key.
Makes sense.
If it's your birthday and you want to have cake and ice cream, go ahead. Have cake and ice cream. But if you have 12 grandkids, right? And they all have birthdays, then don't eat cake and ice cream at every grandkid's birthday party you go to, because that will keep you from making any progress.
True.
Yeah.
Now, did we mention anything? We only got a few minutes left here, but did you throw in intermittent fasting in there a little bit too? Maybe go over that again. I mean, how, and I mentioned exercise, but if you throw exercise in on it, and this is the question: exercise, then intermittent fasting, and low carb, high fat, moderate protein diet. Doesn't that help again with blowtorching this stuff off when you throw intermittent fasting in there?
Intermittent fasting is very helpful. Yeah. And so, basically, for people who come to the program, if you're in the 10% who get stuck on a weight loss plateau, I would say 90% of those people who are stuck, they'll break through and they'll get back to losing weight if they do intermittent fasting. And the way we do it in our group is basically we do a 24-hour fast twice a week. You can pick any day you want, but we do it. A lot of us do it on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And which just means you eat a regular dinner on Monday night, and then you skip breakfast, you skip lunch, and you eat regular dinner on Tuesday night. So that's 24 hours without food. Usually we do it as a fat fast, and a fat fast means you can have something like bulletproof coffee or coconut oil. You can have butter, coconut. Your calories can come from fat. If you want something to eat, you can have bulletproof coffee for breakfast, and that can be your calories for breakfast. Lots of times people will do a broth with maybe some heavy whipping cream in it for lunch, and so the calories are from fat there. So fat and fat, but there's no carbohydrates, no significant amount of protein for 24 hours. And because both carbs and protein raise insulin levels and cause you to store fat. And doing that has helped 90% of the people who get stuck, if they do intermittent fasting twice a week, a 24-hour fast twice a week, they'll get unstuck.
What about people like me who will do? I'm in fast right now. The last meal I've had was Sunday at 6 o'clock, so I haven't eaten anything since Sunday at 6, and I feel fine. But I won't eat again till tomorrow. I mean, I do 72 hours. Is that necessarily a bad thing if you can do it, or a good thing? I don't know.
I think it's fine, but I think it's not necessary for most people. So,
But if I'm
you
more
know
of
what I
a
mean?
but if I'm more of a cheater,
Uh-huh.
if I'm like, you know what I mean? I mean,
Right.
every once in a while, like this weekend, hey, I'll tell you real quick. I had a sandwich, and I knew I was looking at the bread, going, ah, well, you know, but I'm losing weight, and that's the main thing. So I'm doing fasting. Recognize and understand that carbs are not my friend.
Right.
Fair enough. But I also work out too. I exercise a lot. I don't exercise, by the way, during a 72-hour fast. You just
There's
can't
two
do it.
different things that. So losing weight is about lowering your insulin level, and so there's two different ways you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
and you can do them both together, or you can do them separately. Uh, Number one is you eat a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, and that lowers your insulin level after meal, because usually after every meal
You
insulin goes
spike.
high and you
Right.
spike, right? So one
Mm-hmm.
thing you can do is you can lower each spike after a meal by eating a low carb, high fat. And then fasting, what fasting does, it does something totally different. Fasting lowers your basal insulin rate. It's not your after meals, because you're not doing any meals, but just the basal rate goes down. And so, for instance, people, if they haven't eaten anything, they measure insulin levels. Like a normal insulin level in someone whose normal weight is 5. Someone who is obese, which means they're a certain percentage over normal body mass index, their insulin level will be 10, even if they haven't eaten anything. And someone who is an obese type 2 diabetic will have an insulin level of 15, 3 times as high. And so there's two different strategies. One is eat low carb, high fat so you don't spike. And the second is, if you fast, you help lower you lower your fasting insulin level, which is just your basal rate, the amount of insulin you secrete, whether you eat or not. And both of those strategies work.
So for some people, that's a really good combination.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. But sometimes what I find myself doing is after tomorrow, when I first eat, after a 72-hour fast, that come Thursday and Friday, I'll tend to, well, I can have that club sandwich. I'm fine with it. You
I've
know what I
known
mean?
that the thing about just eating the thing about fasting and eating whatever you want is you can still end up with a lot of health problems. And I have known a client who came to the program, was overweight. He had inflammatory Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and he only ate one meal a day every day. So he did a 24-hour fast every single day. But when he ate his one meal, it was lots of rice, lots of bread, lots of sugar. And the rice, the bread, the sugar, all those carbohydrates ended up causing him to be overweight, even though he fasted every single day of his life. So the best approach is you combine those two things. You combine very low carbohydrate diet, and then if you're not losing weight, or if you're stuck or you're not reaching your health goals, you add on intermittent fasting, and you add on that intermittent fasting, and that'll help you break through.
But you always try to keep it low carb when you do go back to eating.
That's right.
That makes sense.
For example, this weekend I went to Cub Scout camp with my son and my daughter, and at Cub Scout camp, we ate basically. I didn't eat any bread or any tortillas, but we ate whatever they served at the mess hall, right? And so I got back on the scale, and yeah, I mean, I gained like 5 or 7 pounds. And then,
Off one day?
yeah, well, not one day. I mean, we were there.
Oh, for a weekend or
Yeah, we
something.
were Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
And so that's a lot of that's fluid. A lot of it's fluid and swelling, inflammation, because there was I didn't eat bread, but there was sugar and stuff like that. And then I got back on the scale the next day, and a couple of those pounds have come off. But I mean, that's what happens. If you eat regular food, you just get out of burning fat, and it takes you a few days to get back.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty impressive. Well, Metabolic Coaching, check us out on the net, metaboliccoaching.net. Of course, Cut the Killer Carbs on Facebook as well. Dr. Justin Anderson, good show. Always appreciate you being here. You can always contact him directly, 448-0322, 448-0322. Doctor, anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up today? Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you back here next Tuesday on the show. But anything else you'd like to mention before we go?
Happy low carbing to everybody until we see you next week.
Yeah, I'm totally I'm getting better. I'm not all the way there, but I'm getting better. And I'm feeling better, looking better. So that's
You do look good.
Well, I'm trying. Hey, stick around now. I'm Confused coming up next. We'll be right back.